Hi everyone, welcome to another Joy Clair Stamps video, this time sharing an easel card and dry embossing. So there's going to be two cards that I make today. I'm going to start off with the first one using the Rose Sentiment stamp set. Now the first thing I wanted to do was create my frame for my card. So one of my favorite techniques to do is die cut inlay, so that's what I'm going to do right now. I just go ahead and take a larger die and then a smaller size die and inlay that right inside. I'm going to run these through my die cutting machine both at the same time, and this works with any shape. I'm using rectangles here, but again, you can use circles, you can use stars, hearts, whatever you want to use. So once I had that run through, I just take that frame that's created, and I'm going to put this inside a wood grain embossing folder. So I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine like I would any other embossing folder. You probably are going to need to play around with your die cutting machine a little bit to see what works best for it. I have found that if I run this through with one flap down, that's too much pressure. Both flaps removed, it's the perfect amount of pressure. It doesn't break my cardstock. But if you've used your machine longer than I have and it doesn't have quite as much pressure as it used to, you might need that extra flap. It's going to be a matter of different machines have different amounts of pressure. You're going to need to play around with it. Now for my little embossed frame now, the dry embossed, I'm going to go ahead and pull out my vintage photo and give it a little color over those embossed edges and along all the outside edges as well. Then to add color inside where my frame is going to be, I've masked off all the edges of an A2 side folding card base. I'm starting off with some antique linen distress ink, and I am just coming in from all four sides, coming in towards the center and leaving kind of a little bit of an oval of white space in the center. Then to darken up those edges, I'm coming in with that vintage photo again, just very lightly on those edges. I don't even think I dipped my blending tool into the ink pad, to be honest. I just used leftover ink. Then I came back in with more antique linen, and you'll see here to get my positioning right, I used the outside cutting edge to kind of hold that place of where that frame was going to be, and that allowed me to get my rectangle of distress ink pretty much right. You can see I'm a little off center there. Now I'm going to do some heat embossing, so I needed to dry that ink. So I did use my heat tool to make sure that was nice and dry. If you know distress inks at all, you know they stay wet for a little bit longer than your normal inks, and they will hold on to that embossing powder. So I put this card into my Misty, my mini Misty, and I'm going to use this to stamp. So I lined up my Rose Sentiment, that outer frame that is just gorgeous. I lined that up right inside where that frame was going to be. And I did put that frame in there as a placeholder. I prepped my surface with my embossing bag, and now I'm going to ink up that stamp with some Versamark ink. You can use whatever ink you like to use best for your embossing. This is just my preferred ink. I'll go ahead and stamp that down. This is a very detailed stamp, so I'm going to give it some really good pressure and a second inking just to make sure that I've got a nice buildup of ink. So when I go and put this embossing powder down, it's going to stay just where this ink is, just in case I've got any little wet areas where that distress ink is. It's going to stick to this ink more than it would the other ink, if that makes any sense. So now once I've got that done, I'm going to go ahead and bring in some copper embossing powder. This is from Zing. Spread that over that embossed image. I'm not going too crazy here because, like I said, just in case that distress ink is wet at all, I don't want much cleanup here. So if there are any stray flecks, you can use your finger to brush them away, or you can use a small paintbrush, a dry one, just to remove those little extra bits and pieces that might stick here and there. Now I'm going to go ahead and heat set this image. Now for larger images like this, I do let my heat gun warm up for like a good 30 seconds, especially when I am embossing on the card panel itself. It's going to warp no matter how careful you are, but to keep it at a minimum is really essential, especially on your card base. So you can see here I'm coming in and I am pulling away pretty quickly as well, just to give that a little bit more time to cool so I don't warp it too awfully much. You can also hit it from the back to kind of straighten it out as well. Now once that was finished, there's that beautiful shine from that copper embossing powder. It almost looks a little rose goldy from the distress ink in the background, the contrast. So in this set, there are a ton of different sentiments that you can inlay into this frame. And one of my least favorite cards to make is a sentiment card. But this is perfect for that occasion. I mean, I don't think anybody really likes making them, but they are necessary. So I decided to go ahead and turn this into a sentiment card while I had that opportunity. So I stamped that Praying for You sentiment right in the center. And I'm just going to go ahead and emboss this with that same copper embossing powder, just cleaning up any little stray flecks with my finger, and then I'll come back in and heat set this. You can see I started from the back on this heat setting, just to kind of straighten out that panel in front. Now I went ahead and added some fun foam and double-sided adhesive so I could pop up this frame and add a little bit more dimension to it. I'll go ahead and line this up with that distress ink that I've already put on, lay this down, and that is going to finish off this first card with that wood grain texture. And there's a closer look at that final card and just how much that dry embossing adds to that overly simple card. And also I love adding that little bit of distress ink right along those raised edges to really help it stand out and kind of just give this card that little last bit of oomph it needs. So for the next card, I'm going to be using that Coffee Quote stamp set that is brand new. And I'm going to go ahead and make an easel card. So for this card, I am starting off with an A2 top folding card base. Now on that front panel where the front of the card is, I'm going to put a score mark right in the center at 2 3/4 inches. Then I'll go ahead and fold that down. Now I am going to give this a good creasing with my bone folder. And there you can see I've got that little triangle now that will pop up along that back panel. And that is going to be the easel part of the card. So I'm going to do some die cutting now and turn this into a little coffee shop sign. So I'm going to use some dies here to create a little bit of die cut art. Now I've went ahead and taped an A2 size craft panel right on top of that front panel that I put the score mark in. I put that score mark in to begin with because I didn't want to cut above it, so I needed to know where it was. Then I came in with a rectangle die. I just used the very top of it to go ahead and cut up in between the two sides to create two legs to the sign. Now, I didn't go higher than that little panel mark, like I said, or that little score mark, and that is because I need that to stay all in one piece, so when it folds up, the legs look like they're folded down towards the bottom of the card and it's standing up like you would see in one of those sidewalk coffee shop signs, just like you see there. So I won't add any adhesive to the back of that coffee shop sign so it pops away from that card. Now I'm also going to show you the chalkboard technique. I wanted to make a chalkboard easel sign, and like you might see out in front of like a really cool coffee shop or something like that, you often see those very neat signs that they made some chalkboard art on. So I thought, why not make one with this brand new Coffee Quote stamp set? I thought that would be really neat. So with that black panel that I've made with that second rectangle die, I used my embossing bag on it, and you can see it leaves that white powder on there. I'm not going to wipe that off. I'll actually end up adding more to it. And that's going to give it kind of like that wipe look that you get once you use a chalkboard. Now I use the Coughing Because Adulting is Hard stamp from that Coffee Quote stamp set. And it's got that little coffee cup in it. It's got different fonts, which is very cute. It's adorable. Now I wanted to add a few little flourishes to that. So I did pick up this other Joy Clair stamp set. It is called Faith Quotes, and it's got these great little flourishes in it. So I grabbed them out, and I'm just going to stamp 2 on each side, and then I'm going to turn these last little 2 and stamp them on the bottom right and bottom left as well, right in those little open spaces. Now I'm using my Versamark ink here, and I am going to heat emboss in white powder. Now I will come back and add a little color in just a minute, but for those stampings I just used my white embossing powder. Now here's where you get to add a little bit of color, a little bit of fun, and a little bit of drawing. I went very simple here, but you could really go in depth and add tons of color and little hand-drawn images if you wanted to. I just colored in that coffee cup, and I'm adding little shadows here and there to those flourishes, and also I'll come in and add some to the words as well, and then a few little dots and lines along the bottom sentiment, because adulting is hard part of that quote. Now, I am using my Prismacolor pencils here. They really put down quite a bit of color, and they're just very vibrant against this black cardstock. But if you don't have Prismacolor pencils, you can use your Crayola pencils, your Crazy Art pencils, whatever you have on hand. So to add a little bit more of a realistic look to that sign that I made, I'm going to go ahead and run it through my embossing machine with that wood grain embossing folder and add some dry embossing to it as well. Now for this particular wood grain embossing folder, I would highly suggest getting a 6x6 if you can find one. I have a smaller version, and you can see here I have to do a little bit of finagling to get it completely to cover that sign because it's not wide enough to go all the way across. So I just had to do a little bit more embossing. Now I cut this part out, but I did come in with some vintage photo like I did on the sign or on the frame before. I added it over those raised edges for more dimension, and then I created a little sidewalk with some gray cardstock, put 2 score marks 1 inch from each side, and I added a little bit of hickory smoke distressing to create that sidewalk. Now I'm going to be using score tape or double-sided adhesive, paper adhesive to put this together. And for the first part of this, I'm just going to put adhesive all along below that score mark that I made very first. And I do not want any above that because I want that sign to pop away from that back panel and be able to stand up. So I just made sure to add that adhesive down below, and because that's going to be the only thing holding my card together, I did kind of load it up and put quite a bit on there. But again, that's going to be the only adhesive holding this card together. So I went ahead and removed that backing paper, and I will line up that panel right over the top of that, and this is going to create that sign that pops up and stands up like you would see out in front of a coffee shop. Now I'm gonna need a piece to hold that up so it will stand up, and that is where that sidewalk comes in. So on the back of it, I'm gonna add some double-sided adhesive. You could also, if you wanted this to stand up even better, add a little bit of dimension on the back of this and really pop that up a little bit, and then it will stay up even more. I wanted it to be nice and flat, so I didn't add any here. It does stand up just fine, but you do need to kind of make sure it's got that really good score mark in it if you're going to do it this way. So once I had that on there, I went ahead and I need to pop up that chalkboard sign right in the front. So I added some fun foam and double-sided adhesive on the back of it, and I will pop it up over that sign right in the center to finish off this card. So there's a look at the finished card, and you still have space inside. I wanted to show you to go ahead and stamp a little sentiment in there, write a little message. You could even use this as a gift card holder. All you would need to do in that case is just put adhesive along the 2 sides and bottom of that sidewalk panel, leave the inside of it without any adhesive, and just slip a little gift card right in there, and it'd be the perfect little coffee shop gift card holder to give to anybody. Now that is going to finish off that card, which is chock full of techniques. You've got some dry embossing, you've got some distressing blending, some punch art, and the chalkboard technique on top of that. Here's a few final pictures of that finished card, and also the other card as well. You can also see on that final card, I came back in with even more of my embossing bag and kind of smeared it over the card for even more of that white chalky look. And here is a final look at both of those cards that I made in today's video. Now on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a few different links that you can click on. And down in the description box, you will also find links to all the stamp sets that I used on both cards today. You'll also find links to all the Joy Clair social media pages where you can follow along for a ton of inspiration. Thanks for watching and happy stamping!